Patrick Hoots from the Carlton Footy Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
James Walker here from the Brisbane Lions.
Jason Johannesson from the Western Bulldogs.
Luke Parker here from the Sydney Swans.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Matt Shaw, Melbourne Football Club.
This is Matt Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hello friends, MJ from the Coaches Panel with a very special Ultimate Footy focused podcast. Here on this episode, going to talk about all the new dual position players that have been awarded to us and now over at your Ultimate Footy team. You can go and check them out to talk through all of the 12 changes that we have. Yes, 12 changes in full. You can go and check out our thoughts on them at coachespanel.tv. But to chat through probably some of the more relevant changes that we do have, and there are some big gains that I want to talk through. I've got Jimmy on the line. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hello, MJ. Hello, listeners. It's good to be back. I've got my voice back finally, which is nice. And I do love a good draft chat, so this is good timing.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about. After rounds 3, 6, 9, 12 and 15 for Ultimate Footy, they will award and have awarded additional player positions. They are already in your team right now. You can go and grab them. If they're in the waiver wire, if they're in the pool, they do have a little bit of timing around it. So depending on where your waiver wire priority is and how deep your squads are, whether or not there's players in the actual pool, you might need to use a waiver wire selection to be able to grab these guys. There are 12 players in total that have received an additional position. 4 have been awarded back status, 2 have been awarded centre, and a pretty sizable 6 have been awarded forward status, and one of them is one of the biggest fantasy footballers in history. Jimmy, let's quickly work through the 4 players that have gained up back status, and one's really relevant for us, I suppose. The other 3, depending on what you're doing, may or may not, but Essendon's Matt Galufi has moved from just being a pure centre to a centre and a back. Sean Atley, the North Melbourne Kangaroo, is a forward and now a back. Josh Battle is a forward, and now he's gaining back status. I suppose, mate, of all those 3, maybe Atley moves from someone that could become rosterable in your back line?
Oh, look, I think he probably does to a point, because he's going at around 70. He's got a little bit of ceiling to him. You need to get lucky with it, but with the depth of defenders this year seems pretty low at the moment. You go looking on the waivers and you're struggling to get someone going 65s in a lot of cases. So depending on how deep the league runs, so having a defender who is probably I think safe to say best 22 more likely than not. So having him there who should probably average around that low 70s mark for the year is not a terrible option if you're running a little bit light.
Yeah, and look, if in a deep keeper league, or depending on the category scorings you have it eligible, Josh Battle gaining back status with a 3-round average in the 60s is certainly not horrible. I wouldn't be certainly using a waiver wire pick unless your category scorings are really favourable for him. But look, that's handy for you because he's showing some developing signs.
He is, but I think it's safe to say that of those 3, it's nothing to get excited about. The UF haven't given us a big name as a brand new defender, certainly for single season leagues. But that's okay. It is still very early days, and I think there's merit in being patient in some ways before giving away too much.
Yeah, probably the biggest back gain for us as Ultimate Footy coaches is probably Fremantle's Adam Chera. Got forward status, which coaches got pretty excited about. Rounds 1 and 2 were a little underwhelming in terms of what owners would have been anticipating. Last week, though, he delivered his first ton of the year, a 102 off the back of a 23 disposals, 7 marks, 5 tackles. I'm not sure if he's consistent enough to put him as an on-field option, but again, depending on the depth of your defensive line, he could all of a sudden become a great versatile option that, depending on the matchups, you may be able to plug him into your back line if you need it.
Oh, that's it. Very handy to have, especially in a keeper league. His value was pretty high already. You certainly weren't dropping into waivers despite his scoring in the first couple of weeks, but he's having that dual position back and forward is very, very nice. Every chance he is a mid only for next year, but if he puts a few more decent scores together this year, you'd be able to sell him very, very high if you wanted to, or hang on to him and reap those longer-term benefits.
Yeah, I think so too.
So I like that one.
Yeah, I do too. There's a couple of gains for midfield line in our centre. Gold Coast Will Powell is a forward. He's now also got a centre status. Again, that's no real relevancy gain for you. That's just some versatility and flexibility for you. He's certainly not someone I'd be over the moon about putting him on the field in my forward line week in, week out, while I know he's had some decent scores in various packets of the year thus far. But, it was really, we're seeing a bit of a scoring drop away trend right now with that 103 round 1, 74 round 2, 51 round 3. We're starting to get Will Powell a little bit more where we'd kind of anticipated that we'd actually see him.
We probably are, but just quietly, he is one that I do think is worth targeting in a keeper league.
Yep.
Because of all of those things. He's shown he can put a decent game together. He is getting the right sort of role in that Gold Coast midfield.
Yeah.
And he's still very young. He's got a lot of talent about him, and he's one that's gone under the radar for a lot. So I think, and with those two lesser scores in the last 2 weeks, now might be the time to throw out a sneaky offer to someone to go, look, he's probably going to be mid-only now. He's not putting up some great scores. What do you reckon about a deal? And, it's worth asking the question for a player like him, I think.
Yeah, I don't mind that. And then the other pretty obvious addition to the centre line for us is the guy that's right now the number one scoring forward in the competition with an average of over 130. I'm talking about Port Adelaide's former captain, Travis Boak. Again, I think the thing that adds for us here as coaches is we've seen now Ollie Wines back in, just the one game of data, but his midfield time wasn't impacted. It was more Willem Drew was impacted and maybe to a lesser extent a Tom Rockcliffe. But Travis Boak had that midfield role, which is fantastic for owners because chances are you got him in sort of that middle portion of the draft, depending on how the draft was falling. But you certainly weren't using a top 5, maybe even a top 8 selection in terms of rounds. And so to be able to pick him up in, around 8, 10, 12, maybe somewhere in that portion of time, and now to get the returns you're getting is awesome. I think that the benefit for him picking up midfield status, apart from the fact that it was just an obvious selection, is if your last on-field midfielder was scoring less than your bench forward, you've now got the opportunity, I suppose, to move that bench forward onto the ground, flip Boak onto the ground, and maybe gain 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points a game. Now, you'd have to have a pretty damn strong forward line to make it happen. But I suppose that's the benefit for coaches if you are running a bit weak in the midfield and strong in the forward line with Boak.
Oh, absolutely. That flexibility, isn't something that should be underestimated either, especially as the season goes on and the war of attrition starts coming and we get more injuries and you're needing to cover more gaps and or even if you're just trying to use a handy loophole somewhere and take an emergency score in your forward line, being able to throw Boak up to your midfield and not miss out on a better forward than that last mid might be is a good way to do it. So no, I don't mind that at all. It's I don't think that should be overlooked.
All right, then there are 6 players that have picked up forward status, some really big names, some real relevant ones, and one that really ain't going to do nothing for you. Let's get the kind of, not irrelevant one, but the less relevant of all the forward options. That is Michael Gibbons, the Carlton Blues. Yes, he had centre status. He's now gained forward. He's clearly taken on that role of the recently retired Matt Wright. I'm not sure if he's even worth a spot on your squad right now, given what he's averaging. The only real thing that could be of benefit is if the Carlton midfield that they've got in there right now start to get impacted by some injuries. Given his VFL history, he could be ones that Bolton looks to throw into the midfield, but that at the moment, based on what the role he's got over the 3 weeks and how that's really capping his scoring, you need some big midfield injuries. You need Cripps to go down. You need Murphy to go down. You need, well, he's a different player, a Fisher and a Petrevsky. You need these primary midfielders to get injured for it then to be worth going to go and pick up Gibbons.
Oh, absolutely. And even then, it would take at least a couple, I think, before he gets any significant mid-time. They've still got Kennedy waiting in the wings and others. So Stocker hasn't got a game yet. Yep. So there'll be those types, I think, that will be more likely to get a run through the mids before Gibbons at this stage. I think they're liking the pressure role that he is applying up forward. He's not getting a heap of the ball himself, but at times, and he's still finding his feet at the senior level, but at times he's having an impact. So I think that's more or less where he stands. He's not one of any real value to us, except in perhaps a very, 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 very deep keeper league if you can swindle a Carlton fan into trading for it.
And when you mean very, very, very deep, you mean a non-existent one. All right, let's talk about a couple of other guys that are gained forward status. They've got back status, both these players. And again, depending on the depth and depending on the categories you have as scoring options, they could be relevant now, but definitely for keeper leagues, I'd be really keeping my eye on both these guys. I'm talking about Oscar Allen and Aaron Norton, both showing really great signs. And again, key position forwards do take their time and also have some inconsistent scoring. But we're seeing enough out of both of these guys that, again, depending on the depth, depending on the categories you have scoring, and if it's a keeper league or single season, they may be worth going to pick up if they're still available.
Yeah, there's room there, and both have shown that they can, on their day, potentially have a bit of ceiling about them as well, which is nice. So they may not be ones that you want to put straight on field straight away, but having them up your sleeve for later on, as you said, especially in a category or a keeper league, is not the worst option. And again, that flexibility of being able to field them back or forward, depending on where your deepest line is a very handy thing to have.
Yeah, look, and potentially you might get a great matchup. You know, one week where you go, okay, the cider, and again, Allen's spending a little bit of extra time in that West Coast Eagles forward line as they restructure without, Mark Lacroix from last year and still getting the rest of their team kind of back to full fitness, a la Josh Kennedy. But someone like a Norton, for example, if they've got a really friendly matchup where they've got really poor quality defensive tools and or their midfield's just going to get beaten up, that's where you do right. You have those options to run him through there. Patrick Ryder has gained forward status to go with his ruck status. That's purely just because, the recruitment of Scott Lysette coupled with the injury to a Charlie Dixon. Ryder's the better forward over the two. That's why he's getting plenty of forward time. He's also spending some time through the ruck, which is great. And again, depending on the categories that you have eligible, not only is it just versatility, but now it's like, well, depending on your forward line depth and depending on the scoring categories you have on, he may be enough to just get on the field for you in the forward line.
Oh, it certainly is. And the other thing with him too is that if, touch wood, a Lysette happens to go down with injury or miss a couple of games here or there, those the ruck minutes for Ryder increase substantially, as do his hit-outs and as does his scoring. So he's not a bad option to have stashed away.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And then probably the two guys that are going to have the greatest impact for us, I think Ryder is one, but there are two guys I think are going to have the greatest impact for Ultimate Footy coaches that have gained forward status. One of them is Ed Curnow. It's one of the significant gains. He now has picked up forward status. He's been a little bit inconsistent this year, and that's because of the move forward, where he's had the 113, the 46, and the 94 from the year so far. But I guess the big gain for coaches is he goes from probably being that last midfielder on ground, if at all, depending on the depth of your squads and the amount of coaches in your league, right through to probably being one of your top two, maybe top three forward options on the ground. So that's a huge win for Curnow owners.
Oh, absolutely. And as we were saying before, that if Walsh happens to be driving Murphy and Cripps to the game and they get T-boned by a bus, Curnow goes straight into that midfield, and suddenly he's averaging 120 again. So it's touch wood, of course. We hope
that's not morbid at all, Jimmy.
No, but it's. But the point being, he would be close to the top of that list to get a midfield role back again if one happens to open up, which is very, very nice. And his scoring's not terrible in the role that he's got now. He's still got room to put out some big scores, even when he is playing across half forward there.
Yeah, look, and you are going to see a bit more scoring variation. What Curnow owners would have loved over the past few years with him is his real consistency and predictability that you can kind of build your side around. He was really not a sexy name for people, but because of his, you're like, man, I know I'm getting an 85 plus out of him every week, with a great ceiling potential. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to get more variation out of him, but you're getting now a guy who could be, maybe F2 is a bit of a stretch, but probably definitely an F3.
Yeah, comfortably. And again, having that variation in scoring. Carlton don't have a whole lot of Thursday, Friday night games this year, thankfully, which means you're not going to be able to loophole in too much. So you are going to have to run that risk. But it is having that ceiling about him that really makes him worth owning. And and those weeks where he does put up the big hundreds, can win you a matchup. So.
No, look,
definitely worth
absolutely.
holding on to.
Yeah, no, definitely. And look, full credit to Ultimate Footy on this one. Historically, and we'll talk about another name in a moment, historically when it comes to bigger scoring impact players or bigger fantasy football names in the Ultimate Footy community, they've been, maybe rightly or wrongly so, a bit more hesitant to award these positions that do have great impact for drafters. Yeah. And what I love about this one is they're pulling the trigger on a couple of really relevant names. So certainly hats off to Ultimate Footy on giving it not just to the young man in Edouard Cano, but also to the little master, Gary Ablett. He has now picked up forward status. It was talked about all pre-season that's where Geelong wanted to spend him predominantly, still having some midfield time, but predominantly forward. We saw that in the JLT. We've now seen that over the opening 3 rounds. And when we talk about him, Jimmy, he was actually getting to the point, he's got a 3-week average of 81, just the one score over 90. That's a really drastic scoring drop-off for coaches. I don't think anyone thought it'd be this big. And he was, to be honest, Ablett owners would have been starting to consider, I think I need to move Gaz to the bench. Because, the scores we've been getting, you're going, look, he's now becoming my last midfielder on the ground. You probably paid a price for him to be your 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th, if you were really lucky. All of a sudden now, you're going from a guy you're questioning, am I going to find a better option off my bench to, again, like Curnow, he should be pretty comfortably, in your top 5 forwards for your side.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing with Gaz too, and as you said, hats off to them for making this change. I wasn't sure that he would actually get it this time around because he has still spent a bit of time in the midfield from what I've seen of him playing. So, credit where it's due. I think we all recognise that he is a forward, and I think talking around the community, most coaches who drafted him did so with the intent of playing him in the forward line before the end of the season. So it's a good move. It has worked out well for those that did take him. As you said, he's not setting the world alight with his scoring, but we all know what he can do on his day. So it's a very handy thing to have. And credit for it coming now when it has. But geez, they have missed a few others.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of guys that I think that over time I'd be keen to see. I think there's probably 4, 5, 6 players like straight off the top of my mind. I know a lot of other coaches, we always sometimes have a little bit of our own beer goggles on thinking about all the guys that we see them get one possession in a particular area of the ground. We think they're playing that line. It's like, well, no, just calm down, mate. They're a midfielder. They're allowed to go inside defensive 50. It's not netball. But I think there are a couple of guys that Ultimate Footy are clearly wanting more data on before they pull the trigger on, rightly or wrongly. Look, they've given us some big names, which I love. Normally, we've just got nothing names in the first round. So I'm stoked we've got some big names here. But there are some guys that I think...
And it is only the first round of changes. There's going to be more.
100%.
It's been only a very small amount of data so far.
That's right.
As you say, I like that they've given us something, but I also like that they've not given us everything straight away.
Yep, exactly. After round 6, 9, 12 and 15. 4 more dual position opportunities for us. I think there's a couple ones that I go, they haven't played enough games yet. So generally 3 games is kind of the qualifier. So someone like North Melbourne's Tom Campbell, I think he'll get forward status, but he's just played the 2 games so far. So I think he's someone that in time should get it. Similar with Sydney Swans' Jackson Thurlow. He's just played the 1 game, which is a pure midfield gain. And again, if he keeps those roles, same with Campbell, they should be pretty safe options we get. But then there's probably 2, 3 players that coaches might have been like, oh, geez, I thought they'd get it. But obviously for Ultimate Footy, it's not hit their qualifying data threshold yet, rightly or wrongly. And probably the most obvious one that the community would have been hoping for would have been Port Adelaide's Brad Ebert.
Yeah, I think so. And he's, from watching those games, had what seems to be a pretty clear role change. But I can also see the counterpoint that, traditionally he's been a midfielder for his entire career. He's played through the mid there, and even these first 3 rounds, he's still spent time in the middle. Not nearly as much as he did before, but I think, it's not a terrible call to wait 3 more weeks to see what happens with him.
Yeah, look, if he's still playing the identical role for the next 3 weeks, he should get it. So I would be thinking if I'm a Brad Ebert owner, now he normally starts the year on fire and slows down late, but I'd be thinking if I was an Ebert owner going, be a bit disappointed he didn't get it. Sure, absolutely. But after round 6, if the roll continues, I believe Ultimate Footy are going to award that one. Similar for a Bailey Fritsch. He's a little bit here, there and everywhere for the first, game and a half, whereas a fair chunk of round 2 and all of round 3, he was one of the key distributors off half-back for Melbourne. It's probably similar. It's going, look, let's wait to round 6. If he's still playing that clear defensive role, he's got to be, right in the mix.
Yep.
Any others?
Absolutely. Look, I think there's a fair argument to be made for a lot of the other rucks. We saw Ryder get it because he is playing predominantly forward. But,
sure.
Players, Nankervis is another who spent long periods in the forward line already, and we're seeing a lot of ruckmen kicking a lot of goals. Sinclair's another. So I wonder if that might be a factor at some point as well, whether some of them might get awarded it. But otherwise, McCluggage is another I've seen spending a bit of time forward. I don't think it's enough yet.
Yep.
It's not a clear role change, but he's one that I'd be keeping a little eye on as well.
Yeah, look, I think, you can, even in the comments section of, Ultimate Footy's posts and ours as well, there's always someone that a coach thinks should get it. The good news is it's just the first of the positional changes. We've got another 4 to come. And what's encouraging for me this year is we are seeing them giving bigger names changes early. And I really am pretty confident that at this current trend that they should make sure they nail all the correct ones.
I think so. Mitch Duncan's another one to get back status at some point, I think. Yeah.
100% agree with that. Coaches might have been hoping Bryce Gibbs picks it up. He spent a lot of time off half-back lately. So, look, there is probably 10 or 20 other names that are there and thereabouts in the conversation. But we've got 12 names. 4 or 5 of them are really relevant for coaches, which will have an impact on leagues, which is exciting. If you want to go and read any more of our thoughts on these new positional changes, you can go and read the article now at coachespanel.tv. Hey, Jimmy, appreciate your thoughts on these new positional changes.
No worries, mate. Always happy to chat drafts.
I know you are, mate. There'll always be plenty of draft content coming to you at coachespanel.tv. We'll always keep up to date for you about the positional changes of Ultimate Footy, both through the articles and via this podcast, which you can get at iTunes and Spotify. Make sure if you've just come across the Coaches Panel, you subscribe, you like those podcasts, and you leave a nice 5-star rating and review. And if you're loving what the Coaches Panel is doing, you can join our Patreon army and help support the Coaches Panel. You can do that at patreon.com/Coaches Panel. Plenty of great rewards and exclusive content if you want to get involved in that. Look, good luck, draft coaches. We hope this week is a fantastic week. I hope all of your guys absolutely crush it this week and you have your best score ever. From all of us here at the Coaches Panel, we'll chat to you soon.